You know that feeling when you're driving on the highway and you hit a certain speed and suddenly the steering wheel starts vibrating just like a little too violently?
Oh yeah, the classic death wobble.
Right. The car isn't falling apart exactly, but you realize with this sudden, very visceral jolt of anxiety that you are moving significantly faster than the machine was ever actually designed to go.
And you end up just gripping the wheel tighter, holding your breath, and basically hoping the tires hold together until you can merge off.
Exactly.
It's a very specific, very modern kind of vertigo.
Yeah.
And I mean, we feel it in our cars, obviously, but increasingly we feel it in our daily lives, too.
We really do. Welcome to today's deep dive. It's Thursday, May 28th, 2026, and today we are unpacking a stack of sociological and systems theory research that basically explains why the entire world feels like that vibrating car right now.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating collection of sources today.
We are looking at a few frameworks, specifically the membrane contact phase model, versions 1.1 and 1.2, the GOA 42 thesis, and operational manuals for something called LMOS, which is a lightweight operating system for the mind.
Sounds super academic, but I promise it's actually incredibly grounded.
Yeah, totally. Because we aren't going to get bogged down in the academic terminology. Our mission today is to decode that exact creeping sensation you probably have every single day.
That feeling that society is just moving way too fast.
Right. That everything is overwhelmingly loud and that our institutions are currently being held together by, nothing more than duct tape.
Just sheer willpower and duct tape.
Exactly. So we're going to give you a completely new set of tools to read the world, protect your mental energy, and understand the hidden physics of modern society. Okay, let's unpack this. The best place to start is by looking at why the world simply cannot seem to make long-term decisions anymore.
Yeah, to understand that, we have to look at a fundamental mechanical mismatch happening right beneath our feet. So historically, society operated on a very logical sequence.
Okay.
First, there was judgment. We debated a problem, we passed a law, we made a strategic choice. Then came implementation, building the infrastructure for that choice.
Makes sense.
And finally, operation. We actually lived with the results. Yeah. So it's judgment, implementation, operation.
Right, so you look at the blueprints, you argue over the blueprints, and only then do you pour the concrete.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But today, the GOA 42 thesis argues that that sequence has completely reversed.
Wait, reversed? How?
It is now operation, followed by becoming an established fact, and only then attempting to explain or regulate it later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the reason for this reversal isn't some accident or like a sudden loss of societal intelligence. It's because of a massive widening speed gap between what these frameworks call fast operating systems and slow operating systems.
Okay, let me guess. Fast OS is technology, and slow OS is us.
Essentially, yes.
Mhm.
I mean, fast OS refers to things like artificial intelligence, global logistics networks, algorithmic financial markets. These systems mutate and adapt in days, sometimes milliseconds. Right. And slow OS refers to human institutions, our culture, our education systems, our legal frameworks, regulatory bodies. And those take years or decades to shift.
So if you connect a gear spinning at 10,000 revolutions per minute directly to a gear spinning at 10 revolutions per minute, the teeth are just going to shatter.
Exactly. That's the perfect visual.
The fast gear is like an AI rollout that instantly changes the global labor market, and the slow gear is a congressional hearing 3 years later trying to figure out what just happened. The operation happened first because the fast gear simply dragged the slow gear along.
That is precisely the mechanism. And because the fast OS is moving at such an incredible velocity, structural changes aren't being implemented in our society because we all sat down and agreed they were the right thing to do.
Right.
They are implemented simply because they couldn't be stopped.
Which means temporary measures and emergency exceptions suddenly become the permanent reality.
Exactly. The correction cost, which is the economic and social price of rolling back a massive technological or logistical shift once society has already adapted to it, it just gets too high.
No one actually designed the reality we are living in right now. It just precipitated out of a sheer lack of time.
It's all reactive.
It's like moving into a new apartment,
Yeah.
and you haven't bought a couch yet, so you set up a cheap folding chair in the living room just for the first week.
Right, just to have somewhere to sit.
Yeah, but then work gets crazy, you're exhausted, and you get so busy that 5 years later you're having guests over, and that folding chair is just the living room furniture. You never made a conscious decision that you wanted a folding chair aesthetic. It just became reality because you didn't have the time to change it.
That's spot on. The temporary becomes the foundational premise. The correction cost of buying a new couch, moving it in, rearranging the room, It's simply too high when you were just trying to survive the week.
But I'd argue that framing it entirely as a speed gap problem lets a lot of people off the hook.
So.
Well, isn't this just a massive failure of leadership? I mean, we see politicians and CEOs constantly deferring difficult choices. It feels like we are blaming the speed of technology for what is essentially cowardice.
It's tempting to view it that way for sure.
Uh,
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't about individual confusion or bad leadership. This is a structural adaptation.
a structural adaptation.
Yeah. When the environment changes so rapidly that human cognitive and institutional limits are breached, the system has no choice but to rely on provisional temporary operations just to survive the next 24 hours.
Oh.
It is an evolutionary response to that speed difference, not a moral failure of a few individuals.
Yeah.
We're functioning this way because right now, relying on folding chairs is the only way the system can function without halting entirely.
Okay, so if we are constantly wrapping friction tape around these shattering gears, if our world is just a towering stack of permanent folding chairs that we never actually meant to keep, what happens to the machine over time? What is the structural toll of living in that reality?
Well, this is where we look at the concept of the membrane from the membrane contact phase model, specifically version 1.1. In this framework, the membrane is the barrier, the interface, between the fast technology and the slow human institutions.
Okay, I'm tracking.
In a healthy system, when friction or heat is generated at that membrane, the system has a way to dissipate it. It cools down. It recovers. But what we are experiencing right now is axiom 12, which they call chronic depolarization.
Chronic depolarization.
Right. This happens when a system maintains extremely high heat constant friction, constant inputs, while having virtually zero cooling capacity.
So it can't vent the steam, the pressure just builds.
Yes, and the result isn't what most people expect. The system doesn't totally collapse.
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't explode into a dramatic apocalypse. Instead, it enters a chronic, constantly inflamed state.
An inflamed state. So basically, it's the physical embodiment of an always-on social media feed, or like a modern corporate environment where every single email is marked urgent.
Exactly. These systems are characterized by constant reaction, hypersensitivity to tiny, even irrelevant stimuli, and a severe shortening of judgment time spans. People in these systems lose the ability to ignore things. Every minor fluctuation is treated as a 5-alarm fire.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If we think about it physically, it's like a muscle that is constantly flexed.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You know, you're holding a heavy weight and your bicep is clenched, it doesn't snap, the arm doesn't fall off, but it never, ever relaxes. It just throbs endlessly.
Yep.
And if someone lightly pokes that flexed, exhausted muscle, you're going to scream, not because the poke was so hard, but because the muscle is hypersensitive from chronic tension. You completely lose the baseline of what it feels like to be relaxed.
And that loss of a baseline is critical. The sources highlight Proposition 9 here. We spent so much time worrying about the sudden, catastrophic collapse of society.
Yeah.
But this model suggests a far more insidious threat, which is the lock-in of chronic depolarization, that we just get permanently stuck in this throbbing, hypersensitive state. It actually forces us to redefine what health means for a civilization. Real health isn't about having zero friction. Friction is inevitable when gears turn. Real health is about the ability to repolarize.
Meaning the ability to recover, to unflex the muscle.
Right.
But you can't just tell the muscle to relax if the weight of all this fast-moving technology is still sitting on it.
Exactly, which brings up the civilization recovery capacity, or CRC. It proves that the stability of a society isn't measured by its economic growth rate or its efficiency or how fast its tech operates. It's measured entirely by its recovery rate. If a system cannot dissipate heat and return to a baseline, it is functionally dying, even if it looks like it's running at peak efficiency.
Okay, so if constant inflamed stress is destroying our recovery capacity, my instinct is to enforce perfect peace. If the gears are grinding, let's mandate that they all spin at the exact same speed. Let's build a society where everything runs smoothly, everyone is perfectly synchronized, and we eliminate the friction entirely.
And that instinct is exactly how you shatter the entire machine.
Wait, really? Perfect synchronization is a trap.
A profound trap. So looking at version 1.2 of the MCP model, specifically the fluid axioms, axiom 14, states that perfect synchronization destroys adaptability and inevitably leads to collapse.
That feels so counterintuitive.
It does, but think about it. If every part of a machine is locked perfectly into the same rhythm, with no give, no slack, and no independence, then the moment a single unexpected shock hits the system, the entire structure breaks. Short-term efficiency kills long-term survival.
Oh, like just-in-time supply chains. They're perfectly synchronized and hyper-efficient. But the moment one cargo ship gets stuck in a canal somewhere, the entire global network collapses because there's absolutely no slack in the system.
Exactly. True stability requires what the researchers call fluctuation. This means noise, play, diversity, redundancy, and local differences. They call this phase S4L, or liquid stability.
Liquid stability.
Think of a forest. A forest is not perfectly synchronized. Trees grow at varying rates, some die and decay. Animals create unpredictable disruptions. That messiness, that localized inefficiency is precisely what allows the forest to survive a severe drought or a massive fire.
Right, whereas a perfectly synchronized, highly efficient monoculture farm can be wiped out entirely by a single specialized pest.
Yes. So Proposition 11 tells us that fluctuation is not noise. It is the source of lifelike stability. The danger to our society isn't things occasionally falling apart or groups disagreeing. The danger is the disappearance of phase fluidity, becoming too rigid to adapt.
So wait, you're telling me that inefficiency, redundancy, and the noise that corporate consultants are usually hired to completely eliminate, those are actually critical for survival.
Yes, and this framework actually redefines the concept of care in a really fascinating way in Proposition 12. We usually think of care as an emotion, empathy or kindness. But here, care is an operational act.
Oh, so care is the infrastructure of repolarization. It is the deliberate maintenance of that liquid state, ensuring there are redundancies, protecting the slack in the system, allowing for the messiness so that the machine doesn't shatter when it gets hit.
Precisely. It's an active process.
This completely shifts the paradigm.
Yep.
So you, the listener, are operating in a chronically depolarized world. You're surrounded by permanent folding chairs. You live in a system that desperately needs this liquid stability. But when you look at the news or engage with your community, all you see is anger, rigidity, and hypersensitivity. If the system is built to be inflamed, how do you survive inside it without burning out?
Well, this is where we transition from understanding the global gears to upgrading your own cognitive software. The researchers proposed the LMOS manuals, a lightweight operating system for reading the world.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
The first principle, core field A, is prioritizing structure over impression.
Meaning I need to change how I consume information.
Drastically. You must stop reading the news or watching videos with the primary goal of judging if the speaker is entirely right or wrong.
So, plausibility over certainty.
Exactly. The old way of endlessly arguing raw facts just feeds the chronic depolarization. It just adds heat to the membrane. Instead, you need to look for the underlying causal structures. What is the invisible architecture driving the event? What fast OS is colliding with what slow OS?
But practically speaking, how do I look at causal structures when someone is practically screaming at me through a screen? Like if my uncle is ranting at a family dinner about some new technology policy, my immediate instinct is to pull up a fact check on my phone to prove him wrong.
Which, again, just adds heat. So Core Field B introduces emotion as gradient. The framework suggests you treat emotion not as raw data to argue against, but as a sensor.
A sensor.
When people show intense anger, profound fear, or even irrational hope, you have been trained to view that as noise, or as a personal bias that must be debated. You should instead view their emotion as a thermometer.
So when you see a politician or an influencer or that relative screaming on social media, don't argue the specific facts of their outrage. View them as a thermometer. Their panic is just a dissonance vector.
Exactly.
It's just a warning light flashing, showing us exactly where the membrane tension or pressure is highest between the fast technology and the slow culture.
Right. Their anger isn't usually about the specific historical fact they are debating. It's a distress signal. It's an indicator that the underlying operating systems of society are grinding against each other right beneath their feet. By reading emotion as a structural gradient, you extract the vital data from the outrage without letting the heat infect your own mental operating system.
You don't have to absorb the heat, you just measure it. I can see how that immediately lowers your own blood pressure.
Totally.
But it's one thing to analyze other people's emotions. How do we protect our own minds? Because the algorithms we interact with aren't just showing us other people's anger, they are actively trying to force us into a rigid, synchronized state of our own.
This is perhaps the most crucial piece of the puzzle. This is phase observation from LMOS version 2.0. We discussed earlier that we live in an era where fast OS outpaces slow OS. But on a purely cognitive level, we live in an era where the speed of explanation is vastly faster than the speed of human digestion.
Oh, right. The moment a complex geopolitical event happens, within 3 seconds, there are 10,000 AI-generated takes, video essays, and ideological breakdowns explaining exactly what it means, who is at fault, and who you are supposed to hate because of it.
And this creates what is known as a closure gradient. There is immense, almost gravitational pressure to instantly categorize every new piece of information. The system demands that you immediately lock in an ideology, form an unshakable opinion, and divide the world neatly into friends and enemies.
Wow.
The pressure is to achieve cognitive closure as fast as humanly possible.
I think everyone feels this. Think about the last time you saw a viral video of like an ambiguous confrontation on the street. Did you feel a physical sense of anxiety until you opened the comment section to see what the correct or dominant opinion was? That anxiety is the closure gradient. You feel unsafe if you don't have a hard intake immediately.
But giving into that closure gradient is exactly how you lose your cognitive fluidity. Instead of seeking a fast, fixed conclusion, that rigid feeling of, I understand this perfectly now and I will never change my mind, we need to actively practice cognitive cooling.
Cognitive cooling. So to resist the closure gradient, the goal is to intentionally delay my own reactions, to force a buffer zone between seeing a headline and deciding how I feel about it.
By deliberately preserving open loops, you have to train yourself to absorb information and intentionally not categorize it immediately. It feels deeply uncomfortable at first because the speed of the world demands an answer, but you must maintain the ability to reobserve something later once the initial heat has dissipated.
And how does artificial intelligence play into this? Because right now, we use AI as the ultimate closure machine. We ask it a question, and it spits out a definitive, summarized answer so we don't have to think about it anymore.
Which is the exact opposite of cognitive cooling.
Yeah.
AI shouldn't be used as an answer generator that closes our thinking and hands us a final verdict. It should be used as an interference observer. We should use it to help us see the structures, to map the friction points, rather than asking it to just tell us who won the argument.
So we use the tech to map the membrane, not to enforce the synchronization.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that this framework actually recontextualizes what we are doing right now in this very audio experience.
Really? How so?
Long-form discussions, analytical deep dives where we take our time exploring a concept function as a low-speed contact layer.
Wait, we are the slow OS.
Yes. Environments designed intentionally not to force immediate agreement or trigger outrage. They exist to restore cognitive cooling and breathing room. The natural pauses, the exploration of complex ideas without demanding a final ideological pledge. This restores the listener's face fluidity in a high-speed world.
So what does this all mean for you? It means giving yourself permission to not have a final, fixed opinion on everything immediately. In a world that is screaming at you to synchronize, to pick a side, to flex that mental muscle and never let it go, leaving mental space is a survival tactic. Refusing to close the loop right away is an act of profound rebellion against a chronically depolarized world.
It is the only way to maintain your own local liquid stability. If you cannot cool down, you cannot adapt. And if you cannot adapt, the temporary folding chairs of your life will permanently lock you in.
Let's pull all of this together. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started by exploring how society's high speed, that relentless fast OS of tech and markets forces temporary fixes to become permanent realities. We're living in a world of folding chairs because the fast gears are dragging the slow gears along, and we simply don't have the time to build real furniture anymore.
And we saw how that friction traps us in chronic depolarization, a state of constant inflammation where the societal muscle is always flexed, leading to a dangerous loss of our recovery capacity.
But the crucial twist was that the answer isn't perfect, rigid order. Enforcing zero friction shatters the machine. True stability requires fluidity and noise. The force survives because it's messy and adaptable, not because it's perfectly synchronized.
Finally, we looked at how to upgrade your own cognitive OS to survive this environment by looking at structure over impression, reading outrage as just a structural pressure gradient, and practicing cognitive cooling to keep your mind open, adaptable, and resistant to the immediate gravitational pull of the closure gradient.
And I want to remind you that this isn't just high-level global theory. This isn't just about geopolitics or the rollout of the latest tech platform. This applies directly to your workplace, your social media feeds, your family dynamics, and your own personal stress levels. The goal isn't to figure out how to fix the entire world's speed. You can't slow down the fast OS. But you can build your own capacity to recover, You can remain fluid.
You can recognize the tension without letting it become your own permanent operating system.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final question to chew on as you go about the rest of your day. Take a look at your own life right now, your habits, your job, the way you interact in your relationships. What is a temporary folding chair decision that you made years ago just to get through a busy week or a stressful month that has quietly, without you even noticing, become your permanent reality? And more importantly, do you have the cognitive cooling required to finally re examine it?